Hi, so in part 5, we're going to recap everything we've covered in parts 1, 2, 3, and 4. So, to recap, we started with this tutorial on how to build a mobile app with an App Engine backend, and we set up our environment including Eclipse, Google plugin for Eclipse, and Android development tools. We set up our mobile assistant application by downloading the source code for the boilerplate from this link. Then we had to set up our Android development environment. So the way to do that is to um, make sure that your SDK is up to date and your Android development tools are also installed. So that's the site for the Android development tools. And once you know that those are installed, check to make sure that your SDK is up to date. So when the SDK is up to date, all these should say installed. Now, the next step was to check that your project had been set up on the Cloud Console. So if you go to cloud.google.com and click on the project that you created, you should see the dashboard with the project number on it. And in your APIs, make sure that your Google Cloud messaging for Android is set to on. And in your credentials, make sure that your server key has been generated using the create new key option and that you have an API key. So once those steps are done, go to File, New, Android Application Project, type Mobile Assistant, and say go to stk.mobileassistant, select the API versions that you would like to support. In my case, I'm going to select between 14 and 19 and use 19 to compile with. Say next, 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 and finish. So once your client application has been generated, you should see your source folder with the main activity.java, and there should not be any build errors at this point. Okay, so to continue, the next step was to set up our App Engine backend project. So to do that, we right click on the client project and say Google, generate App Engine backend. We need the API key and project number. So we also needed to configure the SDK, which we did by downloading the SDK. So if you notice, we have 3 versions listed here. The 1.9.8 is the latest version, so we've selected that. Now in our API key field, we have to enter this API key. So we copy it, paste it. For our project number, we go back to our project dashboard, copy the project number, and paste it. Say create. So wait for it to create. So once that's done, if you expand mobile assistant app engine, you should see the source files, and make sure that the endpoint, which is a message endpoint. In this case, it should contain the API key that we had pasted in our wizard. And in the client application in GCM intent service is where the project number should be listed. So once those two are correctly set up, we can go on to the next step, which is building the application. So in this case, we need a class called check-in. So we're going to check in the, we're going to create a class called check-in. So let's go to Package Explorer under the App Engine project. Click on the package name under source, and we're going to say new class. So here we look type check-in.java, hit finish. So because this is a boilerplate class, we can replace it with our code from the boilerplate sample. So I can just copy the sample code and replace it here. Now the next step is to generate a cloud endpoints class and library. So to generate the cloud endpoints class, we have to follow the entity class design pattern, which is listed here. So essentially, we can select the class that we've just created and say Google generate endpoint cloud endpoint class. So select Google generate cloud endpoint class. What this does is it creates the check-in endpoint class in the same package. Now we need to create the endpoint library. So in the Package Explorer, right-click on the App Engine name and say Google generate endpoint cloud endpoint client library. Once that's done, you should see the client library is listed under the client. So now we have a client and server. Now the next step is to debug this application to test it. But before that, we need to comment out some code in our insert check-in method in the check-in endpoint class. So I go to my check-in endpoint class and go to insert check-in, and I can comment out the code that I don't need. And the other thing that I need to do is change the client application to have the code in the sample, which is main activity. So I can copy everything in main activity.java and paste it in my client application main activity. So there we go. Now the basic things that are happening is that there's a check-in task that is getting called. So all we need to do is provide the correct path in the endpoint library. So once we change the path for the package to read com.codesk, we're going to find that compiles nicely. So the next step is to run this to make sure that it's working. So in our cloud endpoint utils in the mobile assistant project, we can change some configuration options. So here I can set local Android run to true, and my local app engine server URL is localhost 8888, which is fine. So if I run this, I can debug this application. So let's run both the server and the client. So first we'll right click on the mobile assistant app engine project from this tab and say debug as web application, and once that starts up on our local host, we can open our browser and go to localhost 8888 slash underscore AH and slash admin, and it should show us the admin console. Now simultaneously I can run debug as the Android application, and it should start up on my emulator. So let's wait for it to start up on our emulator. So there we go. So the debugger has started and it's launched on our emulator. Now because we added our insert check-in call in our main activity.java, we should see that this check-in task was called, which means that a place ID was set. So when this code ran, it should have created a call called check-in in our data store. So if we list entities and say list, we should see this check-in that we just called. Now if we were to run the app again in our emulator by clicking back, or hitting the home key and then running the application again, so there we should have two entities listed in our admin. So let's refresh. Okay, so actually we have to change our ID in order to have the second entity listed. So let's change the ID and disconnect the debugger, and then run as debug as Android application again. So this time when it starts, it should make a call to the data store and create a second check-in. So let's wait for it to launch. So it's coming back up, and now we go to our admin console and notice that we have two check-ins. So thanks for watching.